Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everyone to a new stream. I'm happy to notice that the YouTube function of my stream, uh, the thumbnail is my background for my profile, and I didn't notice that before. Anyway, uh, my day has been pretty good so far, but you're here, if you're here, to see the next installment of Hitler's Beneficiaries. Currently, yeah, this is the only thing I have on the menu. Um, I hope the volume's fine for everyone. Let me open up something. Docs, chat. Okay, now I'll be. Just a moment. Now I'll be able to see if anyone is watching. Okay, so let me just open this and press record in just a second. Perfect. Tax breaks for the masses. The confiscation of assets both in Germany. Ah, sorry. Tax breaks for the masses. The confiscation of assets of Jews in Germany and, during the war, of foreign nationals was necessary because the Nazi leadership desperately wanted to avoid any broad-based tax hikes, the usual means for financing massive military activity. In late 1937, an assistant to Göring outlined a series of tax increases that would be required in the event of war. Income and payroll taxes would rise by 50% and corporate income tax by 66 and 2/3%, while other forms of earned income would be subjected to an 8% hike. Rates for additional income would increase by 30 to 100%, and the wealth tax would jump to 100%, source 53. Economists who had been studying the issue since 1936 concluded that a greater involvement of the working classes via a 50% hike in wage taxes would be reasonable, since all segments of the populace would be burdened in proportion to their incomes. Source 54. In the spring of 1939, the financial preparations for the war took concrete form. On May 30th, a variety of suggestions were put forward, and the Finance Ministry, promised to work them up into a coherent set of proposals within 10 days. One state secretary, whose authority extended to general economic affairs, had an intriguing idea. He suggested using anticipated post-war revenues as a way of financing wartime expenditures. An accompanying position paper explained that doing so would make it unnecessary to cover the national debt during wartime. The Finance Ministry proposed levying an additional 25% tax on all natural persons and all profits earned by corporate entities. That would increase revenues from wage and income taxes by 5 billion corporate tax revenues by, I'm assuming that was off, by 1.7 billion Reichsmarks. The Reichsbank endorsed the proposal. Source 55. But as of late May, the political leadership had already come to favor an alternative course, the one that would eventually prevail. In order to cover the costs of the Wehrmacht, we must enlist the economic potential of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia and those territories to be conquered in the course of the offensive. Source 56. One Reich strategy, then, was to shift responsibility for funding the Nazi war machine to the citizens of conquered lands, while continuing to spare the majority of its own populace any increased tax burden. Repeatedly over the course of the spring and summer of 1939, civil servants tried to raise tax rates only to find themselves undercut by the Nazi leadership, which intervened to protect lower and middle income Germans. This procedural give and take is evident in the work of Ministerial Council for the Defense of the Reich, which was formed on August 30th, 1939, to draw up a blueprint for wartime taxation. 5 days later, it published a draft of the Wartime Economy Ordinance, Kriegwirtschaftsordnung, or KWVO, source 57. Paragraph 22 of the ordinance imposed an additional wartime tax of 50% on all wages, but it also promptly excluded all but the wealthiest Germans, those with annual incomes over 2,400 Reichsmarks. In practice, that exempted 70% of the German population. An additional 26%, those earning between 2,400 and 60,000 marks annually, incurred only minor additional charges, source 58. In the end, only 4% of the population paid the full 50% surcharge, source 59. Significantly, the KWVO rejected the proposed across-the-board surcharge of 50 and later 25% on general income tax. Broadly targeted taxes were discarded in favor of a system that placed major burdens only on Germany's highest earners, while moderately affecting the next wealthiest 25% of society. The shift in policy conformed to Hitler's 1935 directive that upper-level incomes should be limited during war, either through the compulsory purchase of war bonds or progressively graduated tax on profits. Source 61. Nazi propaganda promoted the KWVO as ensuring that the burden of war was justly distributed and spending power held in check. Source 62. The German leadership created and maintained a kind of wartime socialism aimed at attracting the loyalty of ordinary citizens. We have to prevent individuals from profiting, wrote economist Jens Jessen, while others are sacrificing their lives. Source 63. Hitler formulated the matter in similar terms. When the soldier is fighting on the front, no one should be profiting from the war. When the soldier is dying on the front, no one at home should be shrinking his duty. Source 64. Because the KWVO temporarily suspended extra pay for overtime and for night, Sunday, and holiday labor, the take-home income of working-class Germans decreased at the onset of the war. Source 65. But employers were not the ones who profited. They were required to pay an equivalent sum to the state. Through this regulation, the state took the relatively insignificant total sum of 270 million Reichsmarks from the pockets of the working classes. Source 66. This meant 20% hike in taxes on tobacco, spirit, beer, and sparkling wine, which was put in place on No, I don't get this. I don't get this argument. Let me check something. I'm sorry. I started streaming only a short while ago. Oh my god, this is. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Then 20% hike in taxes on tobacco, spirits, beer, and sparkling wine, which was put in place on September 4th, 1939, did not represent a significant burden. These indirect taxes, these indirect war taxes, the only consumer tax increases imposed by the Nazis, were raised to 50% in November 1941, source 68. But even then, the regime was careful to formulate its regulations so as not to breed popular discontent. For example, in the beer loving southern German consumer regions, the tax was kept at 50 Reichsmarks per 100 liters, while it was raised to 70 Reichsmarks elsewhere. In 1940, the surcharge on a liter of beer, that mood enhancer, as Goebbels called it, was 14 Reichspfennigs in Hamburg and Dresden compared to only 10 in Munich and Vienna, 30% less. A tax on wine was never instituted for fear that it would directly hurt winemakers, whose general economic situation is unfavorable. Source 69. Many workers found the loss of overtime compensation a hardship, and the Reichsdefense Council reinstated it on November 15, 1939, for work in excess of 10 hours a day. Night, Sunday, and holiday pay was also restored, source 70. The general prohibition on vacations was revoked, while the ban on extra pay for 9 and 10-hour workdays remained in place. Extra pay did not count toward the wartime surcharge, his personal exemption, and was taxed at the normal income tax rate, source 71. Many bureaucrats were upset at the loss of income. Economists at the council proposed lowering the annual deductible for the wartime surcharge from 200 from 2400 to 1800 Reichsmarks. Their aim was to restrict consumer spending, but the proposal was rejected by the party hierarchy on political grounds. The financial experts argued that the only truly effective means of redirecting spending power lies in increased appropriation of private income for political consumption, i.e., higher taxation. Schwerin von Kroskig voiced his support. There will be grumbling, but the people will understand, source 73. That enraged Goebbels, who rallied against the servile bureaucrats in the finance ministry for lacking the staff of creative statesmen. He for lacking the staff of creative statesmen. He dubbed their efforts to strike at the very substance of the German people truly pathetic. Source 74. By June 1940, the general consensus among economists was that there was no chance whatsoever of getting any tax measures past Field Marshal Goering or the Führer. On the contrary, bucking all wartime financial logic, the political leadership reinstituted overtime pay for 9 and 10-hour workdays in August 1940. This was a purely populist move taken without any outside pressure. In addition, in December 1940, Armaments Minister Fritz Todt succeeded in declaring income derived from overtime, night, Sunday, and holiday labor exempt from tax and social benefits contributions, source 76. As a result, take home pay rose significantly. Moreover, just in time for the holidays, Christmas bonuses were also declared exempt from the war tax. The top officials of the finance ministry were normally too realistic to approve such handouts, but in the wake of Germany's triumph over France, they convinced themselves that they could afford to be generous, provided, as Deputy Finance Minister Fritz Reinhard wrote to his colleagues, the war ends in 1940. Reinhard continued, "It will surely make a strong public impression in Germany and abroad if we can do without war taxes in a gigantic war such as this." The government treated the interests of German farmers with similar benevolence. For Reichsbank director Bernhard Benning, agriculture represented a special tax oasis, the only branch of the economy that throughout the war has been given special favors in price control and tax policies. Agricultural tax revenues remained constant at 700 to 800 Reichsmarks during the war years, while the state, according to Benning, simultaneously handed out billions in price subsidies to farmers. Indeed, the prices producers were paid for milk and potatoes were raised by 25 to 35% in the course of the war, source 78. In 1943, German farmers possessed more than 10 billion Reichsmarks in liquid assets held by banks and an even larger amount of ready cash. Their financial security resulted from the preferential treatment given farmers in the KWVO. As early as December 1939, a high-ranking financial administrator complained that the privileging of farmers is, in many cases, so grotesque that it can scarcely be kept secret from the rest of the populace, segments of which are being called on to make real sacrifices. To put the matter mildly, it infuriates other people. Source 79. You have to excuse me, I have to check. Oh my god. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more pages. Is anyone live somewhere? Please give a beep in the chat if anyone is live, because in my current condition I'm excuse me. In my current condition, I'm too tired. I can't concentrate on reading. So seriously, if anyone is live, I'd like to know, to have a little bit of a chat, because no, I think I'll end the stream here today. I'm sorry that I've only taken 20 minutes of reading, well, almost 20 minutes, but I need to get more rested. It's literally killing me. Okay, since nobody is active in the chat, I'll just say that what we read today was about how the Nazi regime thought and implemented various ways in which it will reduce the war tax on the German populace, and it will outsource its cost on the conquered territories. There's also the part at the end with their hope of ending the war by 1940, and this allowed for further tax breaks on the populace, both for overtime work and bonuses during the holidays. So this was mainly, this part of the chapter. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll just see you tomorrow.